How's it going, everyone? This video is going to be an analysis of the Ontario election results. We're going to look at the numbers, we're going to look at the map, see if we can notice any trends and if any interesting suggestions appear. So first question is, well, why would someone care about the Ontario election results? Well, I mean, if you live in Ontario, then you care. That's easy. If you live in Canada, a lot of people would care because Ontario is the most populated province in Canada. It has approximately 40% of Canada's population. And Canada's capital, Ottawa, is also in Ontario. And if you're interested in what's going on in the United States or North America in general, well, Ontario has not just Canada's capital, Ottawa, it also has North America's third largest city, which is Toronto. That's also the capital of Ontario, is Toronto. The population of Ontario is approximately 15 million people. That's a lot of people. Most of them live within a couple hours drive of the American border. So what happens in Ontario, it is related to events that have happened or would happen or will happen in the United States. And of course, there's a lot of economic and cultural ties between Canada and the United States. A lot of Ontarians have family in the United States and vice versa. So it is an important, interesting matter to a lot of people. So what we had as a result of this election. Okay, so we have Ontario's Progressive Conservatives, that's the political party, sail to their second majority. So the Progressive Conservatives, this is the mainstream right-wing party in Ontario. On the federal level, they're called the Conservative Party. On the provincial level in Ontario, they're called the Progressive Conservatives. They are essentially the same team, the federal Conservatives, the provincial Progressive Conservatives. The word progressive there has nothing to do with the modern progressive movement. The name predates that. Essentially, in the context of Ontario, Progressive Conservatives, the name means, it's like saying centrist conservatives or moderate conservatives. That's what the party's called on the provincial level. So the Conservatives in Canada federally, or Progressive Conservatives in Ontario, they are analogous to the Republicans in the United States in the sense that they are the mainstream right-wing party. In terms of their policies, though, they're different than the Republicans in certain ways. On the American political spectrum, the Conservatives or Progressive Conservatives would be seen as centrists. So if the moderate people among the Democrats and the more moderate Republicans got together, created their own party that catered more to centrists on the American political spectrum, that would be the Conservative or the Progressive Conservative Party. Although the official name in the province for this party is Progressive Conservatives, people just call them Conservatives for short very often. It's easier to say, and they are very closely tied to the federal Conservative Party. So they won for the second time in a row. They also won 4 years ago, and they won a majority. Okay, so what does majority mean? So in Ontario, how the election works, and I'll show you a map. Ontario is separated into 124 electoral districts or ridings. Okay, and so if I zoom in, you can see more of them. And there's a parliament, provincial parliament, which is like a senate, right? And every one of these electoral districts or ridings, every one of them has their own representative in this parliament. And when the election happens, you vote for whoever will represent your electoral district. And that's the only person you vote for. So at the end, every riding gets their representative. And the representative is usually the member of some mainstream political party. And the party that wins more seats, okay, because each seat in Parliament is tied to a particular riding, the party that wins the most seats, well, their leader, if the leader wins their own seat, their leader becomes the premier, which is like the governor of Ontario. The leader of the party is also someone who is running for a seat in whatever riding it is they represent. Okay, so they are also one of the candidates in one of the ridings. So you don't vote for the leader of the party for who you want to be the premier directly. Okay, you vote for whoever you want representing your particular riding. Okay, so there are 124 of these ridings. And if the party that wins more than anyone else happens to win 63 or more, well, that's a majority. Okay, that's more than 50% of the seats. That means they control more than 50% of the parliament, which means it's very easy for them to pass whatever it is that they want to pass. Okay, so Progressive Conservatives won a majority the second time in a row. Okay, and you can see here they won 83 seats, okay, much more than the 63, 20 more than the 63 needed to gain a majority. And they won 40%, 41% approximately of the vote. Now, the distribution of seats in Parliament, again, is based on how many electoral districts you've won. It's not based on popular vote. So, for example, if we pick any district here, like let's pick Timmins, right? So Progressive Conservatives won about 65% of the vote. The fact that other parties won some percent of the vote doesn't help those parties in any way. Okay, it's just whoever won the most in this particular electoral district, they get the seat in Parliament that represents this electoral district, and the other winnings don't matter. Okay, so it's not the popular vote that gets you, that determines your share of the seats. It is in how many ridings and how many electoral districts you got more than anyone else. So Conservatives got majority, and second place, also for the second election in a row, same thing happened 4 years ago, was the New Democrat Party. Now, in Ontario and Canada, there's a New Democrat Party. There's also the Liberal Party. They're both left-wing parties, okay? But there's a key difference between them. If you look at popular vote, they both won approximately 24%. In terms of ridings, though, the New Democrats won 31, whereas the Liberals won only 8, okay? Which makes the New Democrats the official opposition in Ontario for the second election in a row. Now that's noteworthy because the Liberals are actually Canada's mainstream left-wing party. They are analogous to the American Democrat Party. Not just because they are the mainstream left-wing party, but in terms of their policies, they're quite similar to the Democrats in the United States. Okay, so the New Democrat Party, they are considered more farther left than the Liberals. So just like the Democrat Party, the Liberals are considered center left, okay, but their critics over recent years, over the last decade or so, most of their critics, notice, come from the right wing, okay, because approximately 50% of the population is more right wing than them, and only about a quarter of the population is more left wing than them. Most of their critics come from the right wing, and most of their critics say that they've drifted too far left, which is the same criticism often given to the Democrats in the United States from the right wing of the spectrum. People say they drifted too far left, and so a lot of people who used to support the Liberals, who were more centrist, more moderate left, well, they switched over and started supporting the Conservatives. And this trend has happened in the United States as well between Democrats and Republicans. Now, something that the Conservatives did, well, they embraced this. They started taking on more centrist, center-left-wing positions as well to gather more of those centrist votes from people who weren't too fond of the Liberals anymore. And the progressives, conservatives, became more popular with centrists as a result, but less popular with some of the more right-wing elements of their supporters or former supporters. And if we look at the full list here of the political parties involved, we have the mainstream parties here. But we also have these two new parties that appeared, the New Blue Party and the Ontario Party. Okay, so these are new political parties. They did not win any seats, but their performance is worth mentioning here. Okay, they are both more right-wing than the Progressive Conservatives, right? If you were to describe the Progressive Conservatives as center-right on the Canadian spectrum or just centrist on the American spectrum, the New Blue Party and the Ontario Party would be just right-wing. Okay, not center-right, but right-wing. And they won combined, okay, 2.7 plus 1.8% of the vote. They won about 4.5% of the vote, which sounds like a small number, but that's approximately 1 in 20 people. 1 out of 20 people is not a little. Okay, that's noteworthy. On top of that, if people are split approximately 50-50 between right-wing and left-wing, and that's roughly what it looks like, right? If you look at New Democrats, Liberals, Green Party, they have some left-wing, some right-wing policies, more so they're left-wing though. That's about 50% of the vote. If you look at the Progressive Conservatives along with New Blue Ontario Party, the independent candidate who won a seat also used to be affiliated with the Progressive Conservatives, it's about a 50-50 split between right and left-wing. So if it's 1 in 20 people in general who voted for the more right-wing parties, well, among the more right-wing half of the population, out of those 1 in 20 people, it's the 10 of those people who are more right-wing, it's 1 in 10 right-wingers who are voting for the right-wing parties who are farther right than the conservatives. And that's not counting the people who may agree more with these parties, but they still vote for the conservatives because they feel, oh, if I vote for a non-mainstream party, they're not going to win anyways. It's throwing your vote away, right? So that sends a message to the conservatives saying, a lot of people are saying, okay, we get it. You're taking on more centrist policies. You're becoming more popular as a result of that. More centrist people who used to support the Liberal Party are now voting for you. But if you drift too far to the left, well, then you're actually going to start losing support. So that's a warning sign to the conservatives that voters gave, even though the Progressive Conservatives have actually gained seats rather than lost seats compared to the previous election. So far, what they're doing is working, but we do have some voters sending this warning signal not to go too far with that. So, well, what about the voters who feel more left-wing? So not center-left, but farther left than center-left. Well, they wouldn't mind the Liberals drifting more to the left, but now there's two left-wing parties, right? So for those who believe that Liberals are no longer center-left, which is certainly not the case for everyone. There's a lot of people who consider themselves center-left, and they consider the Liberals center-left or moderate left, and they vote for them and like them. But for those people who consider themselves farther left than center-left, and they feel the Liberals are like that as well, and they also feel the New Democrats are like that, well, they have two different political parties to choose from. And so that vote is going to be split. And as the Liberals became more similar to the New Democrats, from the perspective of those who consider them drifting farther to the left, well, you kind of see how the percent of the vote that they got is very, very similar, right? 23.7 versus 23.8% of the vote. So, and that's the question, right? If someone has been supporting the farther left-wing party, well, they already have a farther left-wing party. Why would it be appealing for them to support a party that was considered more center-left and now is considered more left-wing? So that's one of the explanations given for why the Liberals have been losing support, and why, despite being the mainstream left-wing party, they actually performed worse than the New Democrats, which were the farther left-wing party than them. The other criticism given to them from the more left-wing end of the spectrum is that, well, they haven't drifted farther left enough, while the population has, and so people are leaving the Liberals and voting for a more farther left-wing party, the New Democrats. Now, if that's the case, then drifting farther left for the Liberals would still leave the problem of two left-wing parties existing and splitting the vote. Okay, so, and that's one of the things we notice in any case from this election, is that people have become more polarized. Okay, when the farther left-wing party is winning more seats than the more mainstream left-wing party, okay, now some would argue against that and say that, well, Liberals are as left-wing as the New Democrats now, but others would say no, they're not, right? So without taking sides in that debate, in any case, when you have the party that at least used to be, and to many still is considered the more left-wing party, getting more votes than what has generally been considered the more center left-wing party, that's a sign of polarization, right? When you have these farther right-wing parties appearing, and although they didn't win any seats, they did appear, they didn't exist before, and they won a noteworthy percentage of the vote. Again, that shows polarization. But among this atmosphere of polarization, we still see the winner being a more centrist party, right? Center right-wing, but still center right-wing rather than farther right-wing. So we also see a sign that, yeah, polarization is happening, but a whole lot of people are not happy about that, and they want things to stay more moderate. So then the question becomes like, okay, so by popular vote, things are split approximately 50-50 between right and left wing. Left wing maybe even has a little bit more. But based on the electoral districts, if you add the two left-wing party seats, okay, 31 plus 8, you get 39. That's still not even half of the seats won by the Progressive Conservatives. So Progressive Conservative support is widespread across many, many electoral districts. And that begs the question, well, what's unique about the other ones? Okay, what's different about the other ones? And that's where things get interesting, and we can look at the map. So first thing you notice is like, okay, there's this big orange part in the north, and then the south is mostly blue. So most of Ontario's population is in this southern region, within a couple of hours drive of the American border, which is also in the south. And these large areas here in northern Ontario, these are very sparsely populated regions. There's a lot of wilderness in those regions. To give you an idea, let's just zoom in on this particular one. Okay, this large section here. So the New Democrats won, and they won with large, like 57.5% of the vote. Look how many votes they got to win. Okay, about 2,700 votes. In this huge region, the winning party gets 2,700 votes. Everyone else gets less than that. Okay, and that's a huge territory. Now let's zoom into the Greater Toronto area, and we'll just pick some random territory from there. Okay, so there we go. 15,000 votes. Okay, much more than 2,000 or 2.7 thousand. Right, this tiny little region. Okay, let's pick another small one. Right, 16.8 thousand votes for the winner, and also 16,000 votes for second place. Okay, and we can keep going. Okay, 11,000. Almost 22,000 votes for the winner, 15.4 thousand for second place. Okay, and these are such tiny ridings, but so many more people live in them, right? That if I zoom out to see the entire map, you can't even see those ridings. They're so small. And there's so many more people that are voting than in this huge territory here. So these are very sparsely populated areas, and we do see a lot of support for the New Democrat Party. Okay, so they won in these northern Ontario regions. But once you start getting south or to more populated areas, well, then the Conservatives are winning, right? So we see more populated pockets right here, 2 of them right there, another more populated pocket here, okay, and we do see conservatives winning, and in general, as you get more south to where more of the population is, pretty much everything is blue, okay? So that would suggest a trend that, okay, as population increases, then there's more support for the conservatives. Okay, and whereas where you have lower population, you have these more wilderness or sparsely populated areas, then you have more left-wing support. But of course, that doesn't account for all the left-wing winnings, because there are left-wing pockets, whether orange or red, and there's one Green Party seat in this southern Ontario, which is where the bulk of the population is. Okay, the bulk of the population and the industry and all that. So what's going on there, right? Now, it's tempting to say that, oh, well, you know, the cities are more left-wing than the rural areas. Okay, and that's kind of what people often believe, but the data doesn't seem to correlate with that perfectly, because, well, here you have sparsely populated areas, rural or wilderness, and there's a clear trend here of supporting the left wing, okay? And in the more populated pockets, people are supporting the right wing, actually. As population density increases, people start supporting the right wing. So then what is it about the big cities that says that, okay, so increase in population density means increase in right-wing support until population density gets too high, and then you have an increase in left-wing support? Okay, maybe, but there's also some other anomalies here. So for example, let's zoom in here, right? And this right here is the downtown core of Toronto. And you could say, okay, well, so that's the big city. That's so you have left-wing support in the big city. But all of this around here, well, that's also the Toronto area. That's the greater Toronto area, okay? You also have lots of population density, lots of industrialization. It's mostly blue. Right? Toronto, the greater Toronto area, it's mostly blue, mostly right wing. Plus you have these separate pockets here that seem to be in more right wing regions, but the New Democrats won. Okay, and then you have these other pockets. And so you could say, okay, well, this is a city here. Okay, so the Waterloo-Kitchener region, but Kitchener South, Cambridge, these are also parts of this Waterloo-Kitchener-Cambridge region. It's part of the same urban area. These two parts are left-wing, these two are right-wing. Okay, right here, okay, this is Hamilton, but look at Burlington and look at Hamilton East. They are more right-wing, whereas specifically this part is left-wing. So what exactly is going on? So here's an interesting trend that came to my mind. It's that regions with universities tend to be more left-wing. Okay, so let's go to tend to vote more left-wing. So let's go to Toronto. So in the Toronto core, you have Ryerson University, you have University of Toronto. So you have a lot of the big university town, a lot of university students. Okay, and then you move farther out from the core of the city, things start to become blue pretty much everywhere, except you have these two pockets of orange. Okay, that's the New Democrat Party. What are these two pockets? Well, Oshawa is Ontario Tech University. That's where that is. And this region here, that's where York University is. Okay, so these left-wing pockets coincide with where the universities are. As we move to the west here, okay, Hamilton, that's where you have McMaster University. Okay, Burlington, Hamilton East, they're part of the same greater Hamilton area, but they're far enough away that it's not too convenient for students to be there. Okay, and those parts are blue. Well, that's interesting. Okay, the green, the one seat that the Green Party won, that's in Guelph. Okay, that's also a university town. There's a lot of agricultural research that goes on there. The Green Party, although they do have some policies that are considered more right-wing, they are overwhelmingly considered part of the left-wing movement, a left-wing party. And in the Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo region, which is these four ridings right here. Okay, well, 5 if you count the more outskirts of it, right? But Waterloo, Kitchener Center, that's where you have people who are attending the 2 universities there. Okay, you have the University of Waterloo and you have University of Laurier. Okay, further west, you get to London, okay, where you have a university there as well. Okay, Western University. This is the Niagara Falls region. Okay, you've got university there in St. Catharines. What's interesting is if you go to Windsor, okay, there's a university here. Now it's a small one, although Windsor itself is rather small too. So maybe the small university there doesn't play a role. But it's interesting that the 2 ridings that correspond to Windsor, it's the one where the university is, where you have more enough left-wing support that the left wing won. Okay, that's an interesting trend. Okay, maybe it's coincidence, but it does correlate with people's common perception, which is that, well, in universities, the left-wing ideas tend to be more popular. And it's interesting that the data from Ontario's election seems to correlate with that. Let's go farther east. Okay, so it's a sea of blue. Okay, everything's right wing except this one little pocket. Okay, which is Kingston, where you have University of Queens. Okay, now look how much support the left-wing parties have. 37.7 for the Liberals, 31.2 for the New Democrats. Okay, that's almost 70% of the vote. And then the first right-wing party to come to the list only has about 25% of the vote. And compare that to the areas right next to Kingston. Okay, you have Conservatives win with 58% of the vote. Okay, you have just north of it, Conservatives win with 50% of the vote. Just to the side, Conservatives win with 48% of the vote. Okay, Kingston really stands out here, and being a more densely populated place, again, doesn't provide us with an explanation because, well, all this blue area here is more densely populated. Okay, but it doesn't have universities in it. Okay, and then we get to Ottawa. There's universities in Ottawa as well, and we also see more red liberal areas and more orange New Democrat areas. Okay, so that's an interesting trend. And by the way, the independent candidate here that won, they used to be affiliated with the Conservative Party. You do see the Conservatives come in second place. So that is still congruent with that, all these blue districts you have here. What's interesting for this particular riding is if you take the Conservative vote, okay, 30.5% of the vote, and add the votes that the Ontario Party got, 5.2, well, that already pushes them above the 35% of the vote that the independent candidate got. And if you add the New Blue Party votes, 3.2, well, that pushes them over even more. So you do have a situation here where the split off from the Conservative Party by those who consider them having drifted too far to the center or too far left, it actually results in them losing a seat. Okay, now, for all practical purposes, it might not be a significant loss of a seat because the winner is still someone who was affiliated with the Conservative Party, and so it's the same or a similar ideological camp. But it is noteworthy that this splitting of the vote happened to affect this particular electoral district with an independent candidate, not from a mainstream riding, winning. So that is the numerical analysis of the Ontario election. Interesting trends that we see, especially this correlation with university towns that I mentioned. Now, of course, after people leave university, they don't necessarily have to live on campus, right? So if this does suggest student voting patterns, it seems that those voting patterns do not follow them after graduation. And that also is something commonly believed, that people, well, after they graduate, they start working, they tend to drift more right-wing in their ideology. And again, the data seems to be congruent with that. So that's an interesting observation too. So I hope you enjoyed that, and until next time.